All right, welcome to another episode of the Wine Influence podcast. Today we got an awesome guest and friend, Pablo Gonzales. So first of all, before I introduce him, I just want to say thank you, Pablo, for taking the time to come on here and share with us today.
Uh, Buddy, I just said it right before you went live. I feel like I made it from the moment I met you. I've been dying to be on your podcast. I feel like I finally proved enough value to do it. So I'm really pumped and really honored to be here, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for the kind words. Yeah, so when we first met, you were sort of stumbling your way through trying to figure out, the real direction of the influence side of where you're going and how it's going to be a business case and all that stuff. I mean, you're already putting yourself out there. You're comfortable standing on stages. You were emceeing events. You started, idea of a podcast, but since then you've started a podcast. You've been building brands for other people as a service. That all started after we met. So I'm just excited to sort of talk about your journey and how you got here today. But before I do, before we jump into things, can you just, in your own words, explain in a couple sentences, like what it is that you're doing or what it is that you do?
Yeah. I have created a methodology called the relationship flywheel, which is focused on contextualizing the way that you can build relationships these days at scale, right? Like I believe that I'm designing a category called relationship scaling. And it's this idea that everything that we've always known works fundamentally to create relationships and the people that you know that are the biggest super connectors or whatever, if you can contextualize that now in the context of social media, CRM, marketing principles, thought leadership, software, and methodologies, we now have this ability to have way more relationships than we ever had, right? Like 100 years ago, you could maybe know 20 people and keep up with 20 people. Maybe more than that 100 years ago because it was still the male, right? But like we're now at the point where somebody that you haven't spoken to in 25 years that you casually knew in high school, you wish them a happy birthday thanks to Facebook. Right. So this idea that we just have way more relationships than we ever had before and what it all means, and specifically what that means for business and personal growth is what I am solving for right now. So that's what I'm working on, man. And my company's called Be the Stage, if that matters.
Yeah, it does matter. And we'll be linking that in the description. And I also
Cool.
see it's on the screen here.
All right.
So, before we go into the advice and then your story, are there any stories that come up to mind for you for people that you impacted in ways that you didn't expect as a result of doing what you're doing? So putting yourself out there, emceeing on stages, doing your podcast, doing all of these services for other companies. Has someone that came up to you and just said, "Hey, you had this impact on me," and just like told you something that was impactful on you? And if so, do you mind sharing something?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I was actually just today. I saw my buddy Adam Nimick on Facebook Live, and I remember that early in my journey when I was beyond. We met when I had first started speaking on stages about networking. Shortly thereafter, I started making content about networking. And ahead of this like networking event that I was going to go to, I posted in this Facebook group this piece about just introduce yourself kind of thing, right? Because there's always an introvert in the crowd that wishes that they weren't debating whether to check their phone or just stand around looking around on lonely, and the value that you give people when you introduce yourself. And he saw that before that event, and it changed the game for him, right? Like he was that introvert, and then he decided to channel that energy into being the person that just says hi to whoever isn't speaking, and it completely changed the game. He sought me out that day, and for somebody that like I love this guy, right? Like he is like, he reminds me a lot of you, man. Just like a really well-natured, very present. He's got these like eyes that you just kind of get lost in. No, like not to be weird here on the podcast, but I've only interacted with him like 3 or 4 times in my life, but he sends me these like regular texts and like will send me messages of just like, "Hey man, you changed my life that day. Like you really, really like changed my perspective of what I could do, how many friends I could make, how to do stuff like that." And it's totally changed his life, right? I mean, that's the first one that comes to mind because I literally
Wow.
just saw him making content. And before he didn't really he didn't think he had enough value to make content. And really at the end of the day for me, man, is this belief that everybody has value, right? So like if if I can get really, really good at understanding the value in everybody that I meet and communicating it well, that empowers people to see value in themselves and provide that value to others. And I think that's desperately needed in this world.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's like earlier in your, sharing journey that instance happened, and then
Yeah.
it's sort of grown into where it is today where you get these updates. And it's not like you started out thinking, "Oh, I'm going to impact someone. It's just going to constantly update me and tell me how big of impact I had on him." Like, you weren't thinking that when you were creating that content about how to
Correct.
network and introduce yourself and things like that.
Correct. I was just trying to find my way, man. Like I was just like, dude, I've spent 10,000 hours networking and now I'm in this world of like online entrepreneurship that people go to an event once a year and don't know how to introduce themselves. I think I can help somebody out here. I didn't think, dude, something as simple as not even just the whole like introduce yourself because introverts are dying to be somebody to introduce them, but something as simple as telling people to introduce themselves when they're in the line at registration waiting to walk into an event is such a natural thing for me. And I get all the time, I get people like, dude, when you put that thing about the lineup of just like, yeah, man, every time I'm waiting to like get a drink at a bar or I'm waiting to register or I'm waiting in line for food at a conference or a networking event, I never thought that I should just start a conversation. I'm like, yeah, duh, man. But it's so simple, man. We really overthink this idea that what we know everybody knows. And it's really just not the case. So you might as well put it out there because you never know what's going to help someone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, let's talk a little bit about advice for influencers here. So, let's say you meet someone who, is just starting out, maybe hasn't started their platforms or hasn't really figured out where he wants to go, or maybe they just figured it out but hasn't started yet. What would be some of your biggest advice for this person to grow influence in their space?
Man, to grow influence, you need to find a way to serve the people with the keys to the doors that you're trying to open. That's the number one advice I would give in that space, right? Like this, and that echoes and reverberates throughout everything that I've done since my early 30s, right? When I realized that, like you know me, man, like I'm dying to be everybody's friend. That's always been me, and I have this ability to make friends. And in my early 30s, I thought that the way I did that was by making myself look as cool as possible, right? Like I thought it was, I used that tool selfishly based on my involvement with nonprofits and building young professional groups and then getting in the room with very influential people. I looked around and I realized that really the most influential people are those that are seeking to serve others with their gifts. So once I flipped that paradigm and I made relationship building not about what I can get out of a relationship, but what I can give to every single relationship that I can find, then my influence really started to grow exponentially. So the number, and that goes back to this idea of just like serve the people with the keys to the doors that you're trying to open, right? Like
Right.
be of service, right? Like
So,
if you're trying to grow influence, be of service. Figure out what you love to do that you're really, really good at, and then figure out how to use that in service of others. That is the best way to grow influence.
awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, do you have any just quick tips of maybe an activity someone could do if they were trying to self-discover that for themselves, or something that you've seen or done yourself as far as exploring that?
Man, you got to think on it real hard, right? Like, I took this like 90-day purposeful pause at early 2019 where I decided that I wasn't on the right path, right? Like I was just kind of telling you I've always been somebody with great expectations on me and I've always wanted those expectations, right? I've always wanted to seek greatness. I just didn't like the path that was prescribed to get there. And for me, taking like a 90-day purposeful pause to really figure out what my destination needs to be, like where I want to get to, and then reverse engineer how to get there, was huge, right? Like you can't get perspective without distance, right? So like find a way to create some kind of distance to really figure out where you want to end up. And then once you know where you want to end up, what is a more practical exercise is, really think deeply about who you're trying to serve, right? Like if you're trying to influence something, like who is it that you're trying to influence, right? Like who are the people that are your clientele? Who is it that you're trying to serve? What does that audience look like? And what are they seeking? Then at that point, make a list of all the things that this persona wants have the humility to put yourself as only part of that list, right? Like whatever you're trying to do, whatever your superpower is that you're going to serve with, that's one piece of that equation. Understand the whole equation and then look at the people that you already know that you've served, the people that you know that you're trying to serve, the people in your network that you know that you may not be trying to serve, and people within arm's reach, and figure out who out of those people you can place in front of that person that you're trying to serve that will also help, right? So like if you take that
Right.
inventory of like what the people that you're trying to help need outside of just your same thing, and then you take the inventory of who you know that can help find that need, and then be that middle point between that. I call that being the stage, right? Like you create that connection point between the people that those you're trying to get close to are looking for, and the person that they're seeking. Then you start to become guilty by association of, like, of this value that this person has to offer systematically, while creating all these relationships that you're going to need anyways. So that to me is the exercise, right? Taking that inventory of like, who is it that I'm trying to serve, what they need, what of it I'm not the one that's given that answer, and who can provide that, and let's go make that connection.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks for diving into that, because that's also going to tie well into when we dive into your story here, to see how well you're fit into that ecosystem, because it's a little bit different approach than what everyone takes different approaches, and that's what we're all about here is just influence in general, and then finding different ways people are doing it. So that's the path that you've chosen that works for you, and it's working really well. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. So thanks for giving the that tip.
Happy to do it, man.
So let's sort of twist that a little bit. Let's say you meet someone who's just killing it. They're maybe at your level, higher level than you, or they have their platform, they have their why, they have their niche all figured out. Like, what's something that you're like doing that you feel like is your secret sauce that's attributing to some of your success, compared to maybe some other people who would be in your space?
So when I hear that question, my brain goes to like, how can I become friends with somebody that's killing it more than I'm killing it? Is that what you're asking, or are you asking me like what differentiates me from anybody else?
Yeah, more advice for a seasoned person in this in your space. So if someone is already out there,
Yeah.
maybe being the stage for other people, like what's something that you feel like you're doing different than other people who are being stages for other people that attributes towards your success? So like some of your secret sauce for more seasoned people in the space, not just the people starting out.
Yeah, man. I have a hard time answering that question because I do the more I search for somebody. Okay, fine. I got you. All right, I got it. So I would say the people that I see that are being the stage for other people are either very classically media trained, or they're very classically marketing trained, right? Um, or they're just very emotionally intelligent super connectors, the type of people that you meet, handshake, oh, I'm going to put you in contact with exactly who you're looking for because I got a guy, right? I bring together that triumvirate, right? Like I'm not like super classically media trained, but I was always into performing arts and I know theatricality. I'm not classically marketing trained, but I've spent the last 3 years basically just like really deep into marketing. My whole life, I've studied decision making, psychology, brain, influence, right? Like, because I've always just cared about making friends. And then I've spent the last 10 years networking in rooms of legacy businesses, the bankers, the commercial real estate brokers, the insurance salespeople, right? Like, so what I find that differentiates me is that I'm not I'm really not here to try to tell you how good I am as much as I'm here to give you a golden nugget from somebody else that I've learned, because I've hit this like very unique cross section of society that ranges from the uh, corporate lawyer all the way to the ClickFunnels funnel hacker guy that is just like in a basement trying to like sell online affiliate marketing, right? So making that arbitrage between Fortune 500 corporate America thinking and solopreneur thinking is where I live. It's making that bridge of connection, and I find that usually, somebody falls into like one side of that equation or another. Whereas I've been pretty flat across it for the last at least 5 years, all the way across it.
Yeah, that's a great answer, because I could see how you're self-aware about your situation enough to be able to see where those angles are that you have, and then you've tapped into that. That's what I'm seeing you sort of portray there, because not everybody has those skill sets or those experiences, and
Yeah.
because you have, you bridge the gap between all those, and then you come as that person who's very authentic and really knows that part of the world. And maybe that's the secret sauce, is taking that idea, and then someone else could apply it to themselves. Like, well, what industries have you been in? What are your skill sets that you're applying? Are you connecting them appropriately? And is that really the full value that you're able to deliver, or is there another way that you can angle that to bridge it together?
Yeah, man, I think that's it, right? Like I like to tell people I was voted funniest in high school, but I've never written a joke. I just watched every single funny movie growing up and I knew how to use the lines. So since for the last, really 12 years, I have been fanatical about being in every single networking situation and every business situation. And for the last 10 years, it hasn't been about me. It's been about what I can learn from each person. I've been able to catalog all those one-liners from the funny movie. I've now cataloged all those kind of like, what's your pain point? What's the way that your business works? Like, how are you specifically successful in that niche? And I can repurpose that stuff. So when the strategy that I implement for businesses that I charge $7,500 a month is kind of the same strategy that podcast coaches that are charging $2,000 a month are charging for like business coaches, but I'm talking to like the CMO of a $150 million company and I speak both languages. So
Right.
I think it really is just that, like, the breadth of experience based on the fact that I fanatically learn from other people more than in any other way.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for all that advice.
Thanks. It
All
was a
right.
tough
So
question, dude. I had to dig deep.
yeah, no, I'm glad you did. It
Yeah.
was an awesome answer. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your story. So,
Mhm.
where's the beginning? Like, where did you start sharing in a big way that was sort of leveraging platforms, or
Yeah.
like, tell us a little bit about the beginnings, so we know where to start.
Yeah, man. I've gotten better at telling this in not 25 minutes. So I'm gonna try to keep it to like 6.
Okay.
Um, as you know, Jeremy, right? Like, I've just always been obsessed with friendships. Moved around 3 different continents before I was 9, so I was always like insider, outsider, and always looking to connect. That made me really good at making friends. Up until my early 30s, it was all about me. When my career was as such that I graduated college, Fortune 500 executive and training kind of program, took over the Orange County division of a Fortune 500 national contractor, became a green building expert, started my first company in Miami in 2009 as a green building consulting company. That got acquired a couple years later by a hospital developer, university developer, a big project builder. And as I was doing that, when I came back to Miami, I took the conscious decision to fall in love with Miami the same way that I fell in love with Southern California. And by that, I meant I was going to look at it like a baby, right? I was going to look at it with tourist, fresh eyes, not just this like, Miami again kind of thing. And I was really open to saying yes to stuff that I hadn't done before. And right when I got there, my best friend sent me this email saying that Habitat for Humanity wanted to start a young professionals group because our demographic just was atrocious statistics as far as getting involved with nonprofits. And I raised my hand thinking that I'm a green building guy. I can get business by being part of Habitat. That wasn't the case. But this whole nonprofit engagement completely changed the trajectory of my life because a year later, I was on the board of Habitat. A year later, I did this Leadership Miami program. A year after that, I was on multiple boards and I got to the board of the Economic Development Agency, got named top 20 under 40 in Brickell Magazine and Latino Leaders Magazine. And throughout this time, I had 3 major aha moments. The first one was the moment that I realized it couldn't just be about me. The moment that I realized that my Ace Ventura shtick had a shelf life the older I got. As I got into my 30s, and I was just, as I started meeting with people on the boards of charities, and I just couldn't be talking about, well, the next bachelor party is this. I had to just understand that these people that have really reached these very, very high levels have created these high level relationships based on what can they add to it, not what they can subtract, right? So that was a major aha moment of just like, okay, so now when I enter conversations, it's not how can I look cool, it's how can I make that person feel comfortable enough to share their wisdom with me so that I can, seek to add value in some way. The next big aha moment, man, was when my brother passed away. And, I've told you this story, but my brother passed away from pancreatic cancer at the age of 42, and 1,200 people showed up to his funeral. And at that moment, I realized that the greatest value that you can provide people is community, right? Like I have this weird relationship with the Catholic Church that I haven't, since I was 14. I've just been like kind of in and out. I don't know if I'm buying in. But the moment that these 1,200 people showed up and I took inventory on like how much easier the last 2 years have been and this moment is, even as hard as it was, based on having a community, I was like, okay, this is my community and they got me forever, period. So
Yeah.
that was a major realization. And another realization that came at that moment was this idea that these 1,200 people, I had a lot of outreach afterwards, and everybody to a T would tell me how my brother was this guy that lit up a room and brought people together. And they knew that if he was somewhere that they were going to feel comfortable. And I never had given him credit for that, right? Like I had always seen my brother, who was 8 years older than me, and I would think, okay, so he's done this, that was a mistake, so I don't want to do that. But I never looked at the things that he did really, really well. And that was this realization that everybody around you has more value than you probably are giving them credit for, right? Like best man at my wedding, I didn't give him
Right.
credit for the singular thing that I most value, right? So that was a big learning experience. So then at that point, I put together this idea of I need to seek to add value to people. Community is the greatest value I can provide, and everybody around me has more value than people think. And then was this big thing that is really what I base my business on now. And I got acquired for this company, one in-house as director of sustainability, and I was real pumped about it at first. But a year and a half later, I realized they just kind of like bought me out. I kind of sold my soul, and they left me in a corner to die and be the feel-good hippie guy that really didn't have a career but could speak good, you know. At one point, I knew I wanted to become a business developer because I knew that I could add value, and I knew that I was growing all this influence around me through the nonprofits, right? And I didn't know how to put it together. And then my CEO gets invited to speak at a panel for smart cities, and he decides he doesn't want to go. So they sent me in his stead. And when I get there, it's in front of the Economic Development Agency of Miami and in front of about like 80 people. And I share the stage with the head of the Smart Cities Initiative for the World Bank and the head of Latin America for Cisco Systems, and Pablo, who thinks his career is at a dead end, director of sustainability, the loser guy, right? So I get there, I do my thing, I'm comfortable on stage, and when I come off, there's a line 6 people deep waiting to talk to me. And as I was talking to each person, I have this out-of-body experience. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, everybody here thinks I'm much more important than I am. What's happening? And I realized 2 things. Number one, based on my study of the brain and influence and whatever, because I was so wanting to be self-serving before, I knew that the brain justifies what it sees, not the other way around. So being in an audience, seeing someone on a stage, automatically you expect this person on a stage to have this like elevated sense of value to offer you, right? Like your brain just tells you that. And then the other part was being guilty by association with a couple of people of a certain ilk really helped that whole argument, right? So I'm like, the stage, that's the leverage point of adding value to people because you can give them this validation. And immediately my head didn't go to how can I get on more stages and went to how can I use this trick, right? Like how can I provide stages for other people? So my first move was I reached out to this developer in Coral Gables that was trying to build a high rise in a low density, high income residential area. So nobody wanted a high rise in their backyard, but they were building a high rise on top of the metro rail station across from the University of Miami. So incentivizing public transportation. It's called transit-oriented development. This guy was getting a hell of a time with the community. I reached out to the developer and I said, listen, man, I want to have a panel about transit-oriented development because I think it's important for Miami. I have these young professional groups that need to know about this. I'm going to put you on stage as a politician on the board of one of my charities and the land use attorney that I started this habitat group with. And, I just want to educate people on the value that you're giving. Obviously, this guy said yes. This is a guy that was getting a million phone calls by every contractor broski in town about like, let me get coffee. But he said yes to me because I had value to offer him. Shows up to this event. No big deal. Maybe 20 people show up, whatever. A week later, we're backdooring a $60 million project that everybody in town wanted, and we had no previous relationship. So at that point, I became a business developer through this, and the rest has been this journey of, understanding the value of the stage, and then understanding that thanks to the digital mediums that we now have, there are stages everywhere. And a Facebook channel is a stage, a YouTube channel is a stage, an email list is a stage. like a physical stage is a stage, right? Like a text chain, a WhatsApp group is a stage. I just see
Right.
everything with stages, and I see that as the leverage point of, adding value at scale to whatever you're trying to do, and that's what's led me to this business model.
Okay. Awesome. I think that was pretty close to 6 minutes there.
Yeah, nailed it.
Nice. So yeah, I want to drill in a little bit into some of the stuff that you shared there, and quite amazing. And congrats on where you've gotten to today. It's pretty
Thanks, man.
amazing the journey that you've had. Uh,
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about the when you did the stage when your CEO didn't show up
Mhm.
and sent you to share the stage with the Cisco leader
Yeah.
and these big people. What was it like for you? Was that your first time, like, really on a stage where with such high caliber people next to you on stage, and then is that sort of your first experience in a larger capacity, sharing in an environment like that, where you were then the expert afterwards?
So, y- yes, at that level, but the philanthropic world is a systematic way to learn all of these soft skills that I am right now making my living off of, right? Like, because when you start, if you decide that you want to volunteer for a charity and take part in some committee, at some point you're going to be the head of the committee. At some point you're going to be speaking in front of people because you have to like tell them about whatever. At some point you're going to be welcoming a crowd to your event. At some point you're going to be moderating a panel. At some point you're going to be on a panel. At some point you're going to be public speaking, right? So like
Right.
I had gone through that journey, and I really remember it was about, I got goosebumps talking about it. It was about like 2 years in when I'm the president of this habitat group, and I get up to do exactly what I just told you. We were launching, it was the biggest event we had ever pulled off. It's this like wine tasting competition that's neither here nor there. But I kind of just like went up on stage. I was like, welcome everybody. Like I want to welcome our sponsors, get an MBA from the Wharton School and do this. And this is the program for today. And thank you, Miami Beachville West Side. And thank you for Mansion Neck. I had gotten so many reps that started with just like, hey, everybody, thanks for coming to the volunteer event. that evolved to just like being on a stage that by the time I got to that panel, I was just like, yeah, bro, I'm just here to show up and tell my truth. Like I
Yeah.
know that I knew how to speak about how smart cities tie into the built infrastructure. So I was just going to show up there and talk about the stuff that I always talk about anyways. And I had developed this comfort of being on stage that was really extraordinarily valuable, and it continues to be.
Okay. So I'm curious because you came into it, you've eased your way into getting yourself comfortable on stages. It doesn't sound like there was like a major milestones or something that you've always sort of been comfortable with. But during this journey that you just shared, is there a moment where you had to give yourself permission to sort of level up or think bigger, or give yourself permission to be a certain way? And do you mind sharing on that?
Yeah, dude. So it wasn't during this part of the journey that we're talking about. It was more at this point. I don't know if I had the self-awareness to tell you what I started with here, of saying like, I always knew that I wanted to live up to my expectation, but I didn't like the path. Right. So I was just kind of like, I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I've always naturally wanted to lead and did drama as a kid. So I've kind of been, like I'm an entertainer, bro. I'm the youngest. Yeah. So, but when I went from my next step after being business developer for this hospital company was to be the VP of business development and partner in an e-commerce software for Amazon sellers. And I got there just based on like this philosophy and talking about it and networking. And I got this opportunity. When I went to leave Miami, I had figured out enough. Like I knew I was onto some shit, man. Like I knew I was onto some truth, and the stage thing was real. And I wanted to have I created my own little TED Talk, which was essentially throwing my own goodbye party from Miami. But what I did it as was I wanted to backfill my position on the boards of my 3 different charities that I was a part of. So I just basically blasted all my contacts and said, at one of my charities, Miami Lighthouse for the Blind, I'm going to give a 20-minute speech about why networking is so important, why getting involved in your community is so important, and how to do it. Right. So like that part came natural to me. The lead up to that part, the lead up to like getting there, I was a fucking mess, bro. Right. Like that really to me was the time that I had to really, really give myself permission. because it was my first time that I had designed my own stage to talk about the own thing that I came up with on my own that I now believe in more than anything. And I was
Right.
going to be talking to a bunch of people that I knew, not a bunch of people that I didn't know. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. I'm the green building expert. Here you go. So that one took a lot of like courage, I would say, right? Like I was a mess coming up to it. I was going to be giving this presentation to people that had, half the people in that room had been with me on this path. So in my head, I'm like, these people already know this. Like, why am I even talking to them about this? Right. But like, it ended up being a super, super valuable thing for the people in the room and for myself and for my
Nice.
charities. Right. Because I backfilled the seats that I was leaving.
Yeah, it's really helpful to hear and hear how you navigated that space. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I never told that part about it. So that was cool.
Nice. So a lot of people, are hesitant to get into the space because they might think it takes a long time to get to a point where it can make money, or maybe they don't have powerful enough why to get them started, so that their passion can push them through. So I'm curious, just from a high level, whatever you're most comfortable with, do you mind
Mhm.
sharing, like your, like I guess the income, the financial
Yeah.
situation, just like how you're making money doing what you're doing. Just it can be just sources or however
Yeah.
granular you're willing
I'm,
to be.
I'm an open book, bro. Listen, man, this is the second business that I build. It takes 2 years. Like it takes 2 years to make money in a brand new business, at least a brand new business that you're inventing, right? Like when I showed up to Miami as the green building expert, Miami, I had come from California. I was landing from outer space, right? And it took me about 2 years to get it so profitable that my biggest client decided to buy me out instead of continue to pay my services, right? As a contractor. Now, I took this very deliberate commitment to building a business based on something that I love doing, that I'm really, really good at, that drives the business, right? And I took that 90-day purposeful pause to figure out what the end point was going to be, not making money. And I'll tell you right now, for the last, about year, it's been savings, right? Which we had. And then about 6 months into it, my wife got a job, and that kind of like kept us at break even so I could build this business. Um, so as I iterated through, it took me 90 days to figure out what my purpose was. Then that was like end of March was those 90 days. Then July was the first time I got a client where I was like selling community, right? Like, and that was Brendan Kane, right? We've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
He was a
then
guest on the podcast.
that's right. He was a guest on the podcast.
Yeah.
Then, the Brendan Kane thing, to be perfectly honest, was not the product for him. I think there was some great value that he got out of it. I got a lot of value in that I reformulated what my product is supposed to be, as not, nobody buys community on Monday morning. What they're buying is content marketing. What they're buying is, like sales or whatever. So I reformulated it as a methodology for sales and content marketing. And then December 30th, I signed my biggest client, which is like my success story that I'm sure we're going to talk about, JWB. And at that point, I was able to get $6,500 a month from that client, right? And the whole time I was like, I need to get to the point where I'm making $7,000 a month, roughly, right? Like for us to live. Once my wife got a job, that number just becomes how we can really increase our livelihood. And again, once I signed JWB, it became all about, I need to make sure that this JWB thing is as good and as valuable as possible for JWB. So my first 3 months on that contract, I had one subcontractor for $3,750 a month, one for $1,000 a month, and I was just making a little sliver of a little bit over $1,000 a month on it. I had a couple of other clients that I was doing other things for, so that is supplementing the income. But this is what really drives my business, right? So, and I did that because I wanted to make sure that that 3-month contract became a 3-year contract, right? So
Yeah.
again, left money on the table to make sure that I was serving at my highest capacity. And now as the year has gone on, everything that I was paying outsourcing, I have built in capabilities internally. And I've been proving the methodology to the point where it's been an undoubtedly super smash grand slam home run success. And now I'm at a point where I have a company that operates at around $3,500 a month, and I have clients that are bringing in about 11,000 a month, And I just signed 2 clients at $7,500 a month that don't add anything to my cost of operation. So from here
Wow.
on out, up until probably about like 5, 6 clients at $7,500 a month, I'm not adding costs. So my financial projections is that by the end of Q2 of this year, I'm netting around 40 to 50 grand a month.
Wow. Well, congrats. And and it's clear that you have to make sacrifices. I mean, a common quote is like you have to live how others won't, so that you can live how others can't. Spent time with your pause. Your wife got a job. You basically made minimal for months to prove your case, and then that's what's necessary to build a business. So congrats on getting to this point, and thanks for sharing in so much detail.
Yeah, no problem, man. Like, listen, it takes time, and it takes like knowing what you're trying to get to, right? Like, and the financial projections, and you gotta be comfortable with the worst case scenario, right? Like, my worst case scenario was I had about $120,000, that I had worked my whole life to like accrue, and I was like, man, I'm willing to burn through about 60 of this before I hit a panic button. So as I started burning through that, I landed a client and my wife got a job at the same time. So those were kind of like all right, now I'm not just, my burn rate isn't the same.
Yeah.
And I also think it's a little bit different too, Jeremy, right? Because I think you're whoever's listening to us right now, our friend that's with us, is probably thinking of this from like influencer economics while I build a service-based business, right? Like, I'm taking the
Right.
Gary Vee approach of, I want to fulfill my influence by serving others with it, that will then pay for me to create this giant advertising machine around what I believe that I think can change the world.
Yeah.
So I'm monetizing as a service in order to create my platform as big as possible, a la Gary Vee style.
Yeah, and no, thanks for clarifying that. And I know we're a little bit limited on time, and I do want to dive into a little bit of how this full circle comes together. So, do you mind sharing how you've positioned yourself as the face of? So, you're offering a service of creating the stage for your client, but you're also the MC. You're also the face of that brand. So now you're the face of your client's brand. And that's a really unique situation. So do you mind just maybe 3 to 4 minutes, like a brief summary, just so we can do the full circle here?
Yeah, super easy, man. Like, and yeah, you're right. I basically created, like, it's like if Flow from Progressive would have had the whole idea and approached Progressive with the business plan of how to make her flow, right?
Right.
But I call it the relationship flywheel, man. It has 3 pillars: value, relationships, and content, right? The value piece is kind of what we went through before, right? If you approach a client and you're like, listen, is this audio terrible, man? They're pressure washing the.
It's fine. I can hear a little bit, but it's not
okay,
a deal
cool.
breaker.
All right, cool. I think I got the mic setting on right. So, the value piece is like understanding who you're trying to serve and what they're seeking, right? Like that exercise that we talked about, and figuring out who within your network is able to serve those needs of the people that hold the keys to the doors that you want to open, right? That's another word to say your client, or that's another word to say the person that's going to book you to speak or whatever, right? So when I went to this company, JWB, they're a rental income property investing company, and they find people that I literally just invested with them. I just got a rental income property a couple of weeks ago. I didn't tell you this, but like, I got a mortgage for 28 grand. They gave me a house that they built on land that they acquired, and they have it rented out for the next 3 years, and they property manage it the whole time and find me a new tenant when I need to. And they give me a portfolio manager that tells me how to like use all this money that I'm getting from this thing to go buy more houses and create a portfolio. So, took inventory of what the people that they need, what the people that they're trying to land need. And that inventory ended up being, you need to know about real estate investing. You need to know about investing in general and asset classes and how they fit in. You need to know a little bit about Jacksonville so that you're not just buying a house in like hillbilly Podunk, Florida. You need to trust the people that run the company and show, who they are and why they do what they do. And then you need to see who else is doing this, right? Like that's the value piece, right? So like finding those people, designing the stage where we can have a conversation with those people about those things that the clientele cares about is the value piece. The relationship piece is we now create a show, right? A stage that is a Zoom webinar where we are having one of those conversations a week, and I'm driving 3 relationships. I'm driving the relationship between my client, who's Greg from JWB, and the guest, right? So that is the dude, you're taking like an ideal client out to dinner and you're getting to know them, right? Like, what are your hopes and dreams? What is your superpower? Who can I introduce you to? What can you teach the audience? Like, let's make this person feel really, really special and get in line with them. I'm driving the relationship between his clients at large and Greg himself. Because once, we started with 6 people showing up, and now it's like 75 to 100 people showing up a week, right? So like those 75 to 100 people feel like they get a 1-hour call with Greg every week, who's the co-founder of a $150 million company, but Greg's not spending an hour a time per person, right? So like you're driving that relationship by showing up and giving people value. And then you drive this like third relationship, which is between the guest and the audience. And by that, I mean that when someone asks a question, I don't just ask the question. I phrase it in the term of like, I'm introducing the person that asked the question to the guest so that that person gets a little piece of the stage as well, right? So it's like, hey, Lee Bishop is here. He's a client from Baltimore, Maryland. He owns 6 properties and he's got a couple kids, and this is his goal. And this is what he wants to know about you, right? So then once you're driving those 3 relationships, the content pillar comes in. And that is turning that 1-hour recorded call into a branded YouTube show, a 10 minutes best of YouTube segment, a podcast, a email that is lessons learned from this thing that then gets expanded into a blog that's an SEO optimized blogs about lessons learned from this guest. And then we take the 5 best aha moments, little stories that went back and forth between Greg and the guest, or things that the guest taught the audience. We turn that into social media optimized little, 1 to 3 minute video snippets. We turn the best questions asked by the audience with the person's name who asked it in the title of the thing, like Lee Bishop asks, how do I invest with my 401k, as the title of the thing. And then you show them explaining the answer. And then you optimize that for social media. And then you take the best thing said and you turn that into quote cards and you distribute it, promoting the guest and promoting the audience and all that stuff. And as you're doing that, you land better and better guests, which bring more and more audience, which make better and better content. And it's this flywheel that leads to relationships that becomes this like frictionless, know, like, trust, nurture system. And everybody in their ecosystem is just like enrolling into, oh, this is valuable, so I'm going to take it one step further, right? Like, oh, I like this social media thing, so I'm going to listen to the podcast. I like the podcast, so I'm going to show up on the call. I like showing up to the show, so I'm going to ask a question. I like asking questions and getting them answered, so I'm going to do business with these guys, right? So the journey has been, we started this thing, first show was January 28th. By December 22nd, we had a fan appreciation show that turned into a 1.5 hour client after client coming on, talking about how valuable this thing has been to their life, how they feel they're a part of a community, and how this is why they do business with JWB for an hour and a half. And then it also turned into JWB, who's been around for 14 years on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice. It turned into the biggest quarter they've ever had with the biggest pipeline that they've ever had. And now January has been the biggest January they've ever had. February is on track to be the biggest February they've ever had. And throughout all of it, I'm the face of that brand, right? So now all of their clientele has an affinity towards me, and they listen to my personal podcast and they interact with my content online. And I'm just very seamlessly being guilty by association with these amazing company and amazing people because I'm just moderating their content while driving in a bunch of revenue, while creating community for their clientele, while revamping their marketing completely to make it much more efficient and much more valuable.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thanks for bringing us full circle, because now it all comes together. It all makes sense. Like you've got this business that you've created, doing this fulfillment, but it's more than that. It's being the stage. It's being able to navigate that, and then now you're building influence. You're getting all those people into your world. You might be getting clients from that, or you're getting listeners to your podcast from that. Just you don't know where that's going to take you, but you're getting much more exposure into their world and their network as a result of offering a service at the same time.
Yeah. So I'm brand building in that way, and I'm capacity building because they're funding it. Right. Like, I am growing audience, but I'm also, because I have refined this process for them, I reached the point where I've pointed the gun at myself. So now my podcast does the same thing and creates tons and tons of like repurposed content that I'm now introducing every call I take, I record and I make the best segments of, and I put it on my social media, and I tag the person that I took a call with, sharing their value to the world. And little by little, everyone that follows them is like, oh, my friend's on TV. Oh, who's this guy that they're with? Oh, maybe I should follow him. Oh, maybe I should check out their podcast, right? Like, it's just this like frictionless, no like trust acceleration nurture system that becomes this gravitational ball of energy, and you're at the middle of it.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. Well, I know we're low on time here. You said you had a hard cut off. So I just want to, before I ask the listeners here to like, how they can reach out to you and connect to you and say thank you for sharing what you shared today. Knowing that our audience is people who range from just starting out or haven't started yet to established people on their platforms with their niches and large communities themselves. Do you have any last words for our listeners here today?
Don't try to be the king. Try to be the kingmaker, right? Like if you're trying to be the king, you're competing with everybody trying to be a king. If you're trying to be a kingmaker, everybody that wants to be king or is a king wants to know you. And that is the most sustainable, fastest, strongest way to grow your influence is serve others and make them feel, like their value that they have to offer is valuable to the people around them.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Pablo. So what's the best way for someone to connect with you? Like, let's say a listener here was like, this is very valuable. I just want to say thank you to Pablo. Where do they go?
Listen, I would love for you to check out my podcast, the Chief Executive Connector podcast. Also, if you put my name, Pablo Gonzales, in any podcast search engine, the name Pablo Gonzales, impossible to rank for in anything. Yet now, thanks to audio and a huge growing medium, you put in Pablo Gonzales and the Chief Executive Connector podcast and the Not Your Average Investor show 1 and 2. So that's
Nice.
another little leverage of influence and value that this is providing for me. But yeah, Pablo Gonzales with a Z at the end. And you'll see my podcast. And once you go into my podcast, then you know how to get a hold of me because I have my connection info and all that stuff. But really, just remember, connect with Pablo. If you search connect with Pablo, it'll come to me. And my email address is youshould@connectwithpablo.com because I legitimately, friend that is watching or friend that is listening, I want to be your friend. Just hit me up. I'm in.
Yeah, and links to all that will be in the description and the show notes for this episode. So
thanks, dude.
Before I let you go, you know me, and I'm on my journey of self-development, growing, trying to become better at podcast hosting and building community. So I'd love to just ask your feedback here while we're still recording here live. Just positive, constructive. Just what your thoughts are and how this podcast went for you, or what the movement is happening. Just any kind of feedback.
Yeah, man, dude, I'm so proud of you, man. Like I'm number one. Spoiler alert: it's all positive feedback, right? Like I'm really, really proud of you, dude. I came into this podcast expecting to be asked something that I've never been asked before because I've listened to you progress as an interviewer, and you've gotten really, really good at digging into specific things, and you didn't disappoint, right? Like you're extraordinarily present, which makes you a really good observer to like tease out really good value, man. And I think that is one of your superpowers. And it's shown through today. I'm super proud of you because when I met you, you were just kind of taking the stage for the first time and you were just trying to figure out why influence is important and why you should give yourself license. And, now with the association of influencers that you've created, man, I think you're really, really finding your calling. And I love that you have taken action, man. Like you showed up, COVID hit, and you just started doing weekly. You've done a version of what I'm talking about. You just show up weekly. You put somebody that's of value in front of the audience that you want to serve. You've become an expert in it by picking their brains. You've become guilty by association by all these people that are of a certain ilk. And it's really, really worked for you, man. So like, I just think you're brilliant and you have intuitively done everything that I'm talking about and whatever, man. But I'm just super, super pumped that our friendship has grown this much and how much you have grown has been a amazing snapshot to just like watch as it happens, man. So I think you did a great job with this. I think you're doing a great job with the podcast. I'm just excited for our friendship, man.
Well, thanks so much. That's so I'm speechless right now, but thank you for the feedback. And I'm just as proud of you with just seeing the growth that you've gone through since we've met, and the success that you've gotten to. So congratulations on that. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast. You've made it. We made it to the end of the episode. You are officially a guest of the Winefluence podcast.
I made it.
We'll get you on again sometime in the future as your journey evolves, and we can do another catch up on your journey because it's definitely going to keep going.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you, dude. I really do have to jump off. He just texted me that I'm late for
All
this
right.
meeting.
Yeah. Go ahead and jump off. Thanks.
Dude, you're the man. I appreciate you.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
All right, now that Pablo's jumped off, I just wanted to say, just wanted to say that, if you're trying to grow your influence, listening to these episodes is a great way to do that. We talk to some of the most influential people. We hear some great advice. So it's a great way to learn. But another step of that is to take action. So at some point you need to, start creating that content, start putting your stuff out there. And so a good way to do that is to surround yourself by a support network. And you're more than welcome to join our weekly meetup that we do. If you go to whyinfluence.com, at the top there's community, and you can just subscribe with your email address, and then you're sent to the Zoom link every week to the community meetup. And definitely encourage you to check that out if you're trying to grow your influence. There's a lot of amazing people in there. There's Jeff with over 300,000 Twitter followers. There's Sabi with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers. There's a lot of amazing people in that group that show up consistently, and we'd love to have you if this is something that's important to you. So thanks, as always, for listening to this episode in its entirety, and I look forward to seeing you next episode. Thanks so much.